And welcome to another edition of The Watchmen. We are just a couple of dudes sitting on the wall watching the world go by. The world's been a busy place the last week or so. This time, I'd like to take the time to welcome Checkmate. How we doing, Checkmate?
Doing really well, and greetings and salutations to our viewers/listeners. Sorry we haven't been around. We've been pretty busy, I'm sure, as you all have, and the world hasn't slowed down either.
No, it hasn't. And we're gonna cover a big swath of the planet. Middle East, Southeast Asia will be in focus this week, and we are going to start with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, they actually met a little over a week ago, and I think they met in, was it Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan? I can't remember which one. But essentially, go ahead.
I thought they met in Kazakhstan.
Okay, there you go. I'll defer to you on that one. But this is currently a member or a group of 8 member nations. And you can see these: Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, India, Pakistan, and China. Now, this incidentally was also the last time Xi Jinping was seen alive. There's been plenty of talk about his whereabouts, and it will all kind of tie together when we start at this place. So the other thing I find interesting, currently 8 member nations, and guess who wanted to join? And this is per Al Arabia, the English version. Iran has signed a Memorandum of Obligations to become a permanent member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO. And Tehran seeks to overcome economic isolation amid U.S. sanctions. So there's Raisi in his gear. He's going to sign the document for us. You have any thoughts on this as we watch these little tablets exchanged?
In a way, part of me is kind of gleeful at something like this, from the simple standpoint that it's showing that for all of their soothsaying at the World Economic Forum, it just goes to show the Chinese were always playing a double game, even a triple game, that they really don't care about the Western liberal order being a part of it and being a good, a player in good standing. They want their own world order, and this is just yet another vehicle of countries that are simply not natural allies. It's another useful vehicle to realize that.
So with Iran, we would have 9. And the reason I'm very curious about this, my man, Turkey's Recep Erdogan, he wants to sign too. And if he were to sign, that would give us 10 nations. Now, am I saying this is the 10-nation group of iron and clay toes? No, I'm not. But it gets us to 10. And there's just been no evidence of a 10-nation group getting together. And what do you make of Erdogan?
He's always had this idea, traditionally Turkish idea of being a bridge between Europe and Asia. That was their natural place in the world, was to bring those two peoples together, which is a post-Kemal Ataturk, early 20th century notion that would inform a lot of their diplomacy. Is that they could be the go-betweens between the two worlds, and because they had a foot in both of them. The problem is that it's Erdogan, and it is yet another shiny veneer on his pan-Islamic imperial ambitions, which are continually faltering, and it would be comical but for the fact that people are really getting hurt and killed every time he undertakes a misguided attempt at international greatness.
Well, we've talked about this before. This guy's just such a wild card, and he's so unpredictable. Again, so, prophetically, we're looking at Revelation's 10-headed beast. Daniel talks about it, the statue with iron and clay toes. We get the 10. But it also shows parts of Ezekiel 38 and 39 where Russia is part of this, and that would bring Iran and Turkey into the fold, solidifying that coalition of nations from Ezekiel 38 and 39. And they've got their own set of issues. We're going to transition to Iran, and this is Mahsa Amini. Now, this young lady, she dared to take off her hijab and did just, I'm not wearing it. And the hardliners, they killed her. And in response to her death, there have been nationwide protests going on, I want to say 8, 9, 10 days now. Everybody's pretty much fed up with the Iranian government and the mullahs. And then here's a brief response to this. And yes, you're not going to see anybody's face, and that's done by design. Because what the government, those in power in Iran who are doing, they're taking these videos of all these protests around the nation. They're identifying these people. They're rounding them up, and in some cases killing them and jailing them. There have been, I think last I saw, 41 people killed that have been counted. Who knows how many actually. So to protect these folks who are pretty much, is it fair to say they want to overthrow the government? Is that an accurate statement? Is this their revolution?
I don't know. I mean, that seems to be what is going through the international community. Luckily, the international zeitgeist is in such disarray, at least the faction among the zeitgeist that generally calls the shots for the money, mainly because Ukraine kind of exploded in their face, pardon the pun. And what we're looking at with the Iranians is that there was an understanding on the part of the regime that something was going to blow about 2 weeks ago, when they had this piece that took off internationally about putting civil defense systems into various cities. I think they were an upgrade to their signals intercept capability to be able to listen in on things like cell phones and monitor social media. And it was kind of confusing whether it was run by the Siege or whether it was run by the Ministry of Defense. And so they were planning for it, and they spread it out into 51 of their cities. And so I get the feeling the regime knew something was going to give, and that the murder of this poor lady was merely proximate cause. And it was really what triggered this was the cover-up of it. Because she had been either not wearing her hijab in Arabic or chador in Persian properly, and when she got beaten near to death, they rushed her to the hospital, and when she died, they attributed it to some sort of other cause, and the people weren't buying it. So that served her death served as proximate cause for a lot of other tensions.
Well, always the same. The cover-up's usually worse than the crime, and they're trying to cover this up as well. And this was as of, oh gosh, give me a date here. What do we got? The 19th, September 19th. So going on 6 days now. Internet has just been pretty much shut down in Iran. Mobile networks largely shut down. Regional disruptions observed during protest. Instagram, WhatsApp restricted. My understanding was TikTok. They felt pretty good they could shut down TikTok, but there are all kinds of things that are obviously still getting out, and we see those things.
They're getting the old assist from Beijing on shutting down TikTok.
Well, that's a very good point. That's TikTok is China's, so nothing like helping out a new friend of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
That's right.
And you'd sent me this as well, like for people. I'll let you explain this. Your thinking behind this article and how people want to take a deeper dive.
Yeah, I recommend this article just because I think it encapsulates. This is Israel Hayom. I think it really, because naturally the Israelis pay close attention and to what happens in Iran, and Hayom does a more responsible job in the security domain of explaining the so what factor. in whatever it is they publish on the subject of Iran. There's a lot less of an infusion of Western accommodationism with Iran, as you might find in Haaretz or Jerusalem Post, who talk a good game, but in the final analysis, diplomacy must prevail is usually where they go. Whereas Hayum gets a little more into what does it really mean, what is going on there. The question that's been getting begged around D.C. is, is this the sunset moment for this regime? And we have been down this road of sunset moment for this regime, roughly a little better than every 10 years. And they managed to come through because they get a lifeline from the outside world that greenlights some of the most brutal repressive measures, and that's why, as the signal picture, as the internet connections, and as information slows down coming out of Iran, you can guarantee that the Iranian embassies and Iranian-friendly talking heads are stepping up efforts to keep the communications robust for that final, okay, if we let you do this, you won't let it get out. And it's really pretty sick little game they've got going on. Once again, I come back to Western economic interests as being chiefly responsible for it. So I thought that this was one of the more thought-provoking examinations of the entire situation.
Very good. And from Iran, we're going to transition to Ukraine and Russia. Now, currently, they are voting. I think some of the 4 regions are voting as to whether or not they want to become a member or essentially become part of Russia's territory. But before we got there, the Saudis, specifically the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, was a peace negotiator. Now, I know there are several folks who follow the Watchmen, also follow PaulthePoke, and I get plenty of feedback from people who have a pretty strong opinion that they think Mohammed bin Salman is the Antichrist. So, I don't know that he is or not. I would lean towards no. He's not a good guy. I don't want to say I'm endorsing him by any chance. But he wants to be in the thick of it. Prophecy tells us in Ezekiel 38:39, the Saudis will just kind of stand by when Russia comes to invade, and they won't do anything. They'll protest it, but they won't intervene on behalf of Israel, except for asking you just doing this for economic gain, is just paraphrasing scripture, but that's the issue. But the guy wants to be a player on the world stage, and he was in the middle of negotiating a prisoner swap between the Russians, the Ukrainians. Looks like we got some British nationals were released in a deal as well. So I know you got some insight, checkmate, on this situation, and turn it over to you.
Well, we'll be getting into the world food issue. He has a population that is not highly agrarian that he has to feed also. And the breadbasket of the Middle East is Iraq, generally, with the state of the Iranian agricultural landscape being so poor. So it wouldn't surprise me if, with the Iranians getting a lot of preferential treatment from the Russians these days, that he was very interested in positioning the kingdom to be a food broker in relation to where its interests are directly engaged. These would be places like Yemen and Pakistan in particular, that they buy themselves some goodwill and they buy themselves some fealty by being able to make food and therefore keep peace in those areas where, again, their interests are directly engaged.
Well, it's interesting, from the food angle, because the thing that they need to grow food is water. And I have been getting a steady diet of articles brought to my attention regarding mostly the Tigris River at this point, how it is running dry. Now, we also know Scripture says the Euphrates eventually will run dry, and that will allow the way for the kings of the East. So you got the 2 primary sources of water coming down through what is ancient Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, down around Babylon, Baghdad area, the farming area that's just going dry, and you got farms. People can't grow crops, can't raise livestock, and they're leaving. Can't do it. So, he's got to be paying attention to that as well. He being bin Salman. So, yet another reason. And then,
and
go ahead.
And I would add, with respect to the Mesopotamia there, the land between those two rivers, the headwaters that feed those rivers are in Turkey.
Yes.
And Turkey has built a lot of dams, and this is their new water diplomacy when they want to let the world know that they're not happy.
That's correct. I forget how many dams. I know it's at least over 20 dams they have built or are continuing to build to control water over pretty much Iraq and parts of Iran as well, especially when that, involves the Tigris River. So food and water, or water and food, are a significant factor in all of this, which takes us to, you had sent me this in regards to Ukrainian President Zelensky telling President Biden, he could help the whole world by declaring Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. So I'll turn this over to you. I don't know that Biden, if he can remember what was being said to him, just watching him on a weekly basis, shaking hands with phantom people and not knowing where to go on stage and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of typical of Zelensky piling on at the direction of somebody. And I know I've said it here in Watchmen before, because I read it from a guy who does actual Russian strategy research, that it's too bad the Ukrainians can't fight the way they can do Twitter. And it really is true that Zelensky, he piles on at moments where Vladimir Putin makes a threat that he's reminding the world we are still a nuclear power, and I'm going to consolidate, and Ukrainians will sue for peace, and I'll back my territorial gains up with nukes. And so the reason why Putin runs to the nuclear issue so rapidly is it is the only time, because even the piece here in the Daily Mail notes, Jake Sullivan comes out, it's the only time he can get the attention of the United States that he really means business about what his objectives are. And in a perverse way, he's being very honest about what he wants. He wants to return to roughly what was the 2014 operation that they had in Ukraine, with the Crimean question resolved. And the only way he can get that entertained seriously and call off the dogs with Zelensky is to use the threat nukes. I've watched this every time he's thrown nuclear out there. The White House actually responds to what's going on.
Well, that's the thing that concerns me too with that, and at some point, his words may get called. Putin's words may get called. And he says he's serious. He says he's not bluffing. And, like you say, that's been going on since 14. So for 8 years, we've heard that. And my concern is at what point does the United States, the West, call him on it? It's like, hey, are you gonna do it or not? And
I used to work the nuclear portfolio, and I'm very fond of saying, having sat and discussed with nuclear strategists, can you win a nuclear war? Yes, you can, by the definitions of nuclear war. Do you want to live in a world where the definitions of nuclear war are in play for victory? I certainly don't, so best not to try. The fact is that I think Putin really wants peace. The Ukrainians are being really quite obstinate because they have a view of Ukraine that has not taken into account what some people would call pogroms, but the 1920s and the 1930s, Stalin's plan of Russification of Eastern Ukraine. It is really fait accompli that even if you got the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe into all of those provinces, had Westerners on all of those polls, you would still return a pro-Russia sentiment no matter what. And it's even worse now because what people would call ethnic Ukrainians, they've run away. They've been driven out. So this is one of those moments where I think Zelensky understands that the members of the Azov regiment who are still on the upper side of dirt would probably come looking for him if he were to make a deal.
Very interesting. One thing I saw too that I thought was a little different. Maybe I just haven't paid that close of attention. There were some members of the Russian Duma speaking, and specifically we're talking to Germany and Great Britain, telling them, hey, you need to back off. We're not looking to take your land. We'll just fire a tactical nuclear weapon, and in 3 minutes you will look like those pieces of land will look like Martian landscape. And the guy was just sobering straight about it. He wasn't doing it for hyperbole like some of the stuff we see here in the West, where people say things for shock and effect and to get attention. I mean, it was just stated frankly, like, we will do this. And it's like, you keep talking about it, and
it's in open media that the Russians have a numerical advantage on tactical nukes over NATO.
Yeah. Time will tell. And so the response to all that in Moscow and across Russia, St. Petersburg for others, you got people protesting, no to war. I've seen plenty of these types of demonstrations in downtown Moscow as well in regards to the draft of 300,000. I've seen some reports that number may go as high, over a series of resolutions, as high as 1.2 million soldiers being drafted into service. Some of the young men they're not young men, just men in general being drafted into service are showing up drunk and trying to stay drunk so they don't have to participate. So, what's your take on the number of soldiers? Do you think that's going to go higher? What's your feel for what's going on here?
I can't help but think that this is the push for additional soldiers is an adjunct to recruiting, and Putin is willing to withstand the political pain that comes from this. Simply because, again, I think what he wants is a consolidation. He wants to show the world he's willing to go the final mile. Because the Russian style very much is ask for much, much more than you could reasonably expect to get, so that you'll gain what you want and then a little extra. Time and again, that's what they do. I think Putin really does want to wind this thing down. So it wouldn't surprise me in the least if this was a little bit of propaganda on his part to, again, show the world I'm willing to keep going. I answer to nobody.
Well, it's interesting, pressing times. And from Russia, Ukraine, we're going to transition back to the Middle East. And this is from Wall Street Silver. Great follow for those of you who want to follow economic news. He's got all sorts of fun, interesting facts and tweets. Highly recommending. But this is within the last week. 10 banks have been robbed today in Lebanon by people who are claiming their money is frozen by the government due to the economic crisis. So you got people literally breaking into banks, trying to get their own money. So, desperate for their own funds, and inflation is absolutely out of control in Lebanon. I want to say the latest I had seen, $1 was the equivalent of maybe 40 to 60,000 Lebanese lira. It's out of control. So, I mean, imagine trying to pay for food. And when you look at,
I was going to say, on top of that, there's a food crisis with Hezbollah basically having the lion's share of access to food. If an army marches on its stomach, soldiers can be incited to join said army by nothing in their stomach.
That's right. And then we had about 2 years ago, their grain storage there on the Mediterranean blew up. That was effectively holding the grain for the balance of the country. And that kind of really set this whole thing into motion, even more so than what was already happening. You had the grain supply of the country destroyed with an explosion. In food, we keep talking about food, but if you not paying attention, I don't know what to tell you, but there's clearly an assault that's taking place around the planet on food sources. And, we've chronicled that over the last few months, and we're into this time of the year, where they've been able to harvest what they can. You have fertilizer production is down, so we're not going to have the yield on the crops we've had in the past. We've got the breadbasket of Europe, the Ukraine, and frankly, the breadbasket of North Africa, the Middle East. A significant portion of that is being affected in Ukraine. And then we get this today out of Paris. Rungis or Rungi, my apologies to the French, the largest wholesale fresh produce market in the world is on fire in Paris. And of course, this provides a lot of food to the people of Paris. And I would also think that this is like a distribution hub of produce for the country as well. Have you ever been there?
I have never been there. I'm sure I would have some clue how to pronounce it. And congratulations on the genocide of the Jerry Lewis fan club with your bad pronunciation.
Well, I do what I can. But we keep talking about food, and here we go. Early warning hunger hotspots. I mean, October 22 to January 23, and it's right where the places we expected it would be. Central Africa, and then of course you have Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Syria. Madagascar is having its own set of issues. So's Sri Lanka, in regards to they've been cut off from the continent. Can't get water, food, well, not water, excuse me, energy, oil, gas, and food to these places. They're having all kinds of difficulties, and this is just getting started, people, because we're at a point now where we're looking to plant crops for what will be harvested in 23, and those crops will be harvested, grain crops will be harvested in roughly 6 to 8 months. And if they can't get them in the ground, and if they don't have the fertilizer to do it, we're not going to have the yield, and we're not going to have we're just not going to have enough grain. Is what it is. Might want to have some extra food around, people. This is Gateway Pundit. They've been, well, here's the map. Here we go. Updated list of U.S.-based food manufacturing plants destroyed under Biden regime. You can now participate and add more incidents on the interactive map. And here we go. These are the places that have been affected. Food processing plants. Most of them in the United States, but just around the world.
A lot of that is just because of the centralized nature of those governments. Because as we've talked about on and off throughout this entire presentation, food is power, water is power. In the Middle East, water's more powerful than oil.
Yeah, and like you said, Turkey's going to exert that power with their dams and controlling the flow of water. The Euphrates through Syria and Iraq, and the Tigris wanders around a little bit and down through the northern part of Iraq on down into the Persian Gulf. So going to continue to be an issue. Now, also, this is something that's kind of happened within the last 3 weeks. This is the second. This is from Josh Group, 13 ABC out of Toledo, Ohio. He's got his Emmy there. And he's reporting, he had the video up of a fire at a BP Toledo refinery. Now, this is the second significant fire of an oil refinery plant in this part of the country. So this is primarily going to affect the states of Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So if you're living in one of those 4 states, your fuel prices are probably going up. And it's so significant that the I want to say the government and the EPA or somebody, one of those government agencies, lifted some rules that will allow for the greatest ease of transport of energy, because they see what's potentially coming with this. So I want to top off your tank if you live in those parts of the country when you get a chance.
Or search between your couch cushions and come up with the $60,000 to get the car.
That's right.
You see,
you do that.
Alternative.
That's right. That is an alternative. And also, if you've seen that in California, that there are lines to recharge said electrical car because the temperatures are very hot. And you know what? That's not good on the grid. So they're asking those folks to cut back on air conditioning and do not charge your electrical vehicle. So it's a great, great plan. I saw something the other day too. Just the amount of copper it would take for this transition to take place. The amount of copper, we literally need double the amount of copper that we have effectively mined since we've been utilizing electricity. And we're just not going to be able to find that amount of copper fast enough to do this in the time frame these people want done. It's just not feasible.
Yeah, I mean, Green New Deal, it's not a scam or a put-up job.
No.
I mean, it's viable.
No, it's good for us. It's for your own good, people. And we're going to close with, Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah. On the calendar, that starts today. And I know, Checkmate, you had some thoughts on this article, and I'll turn this over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to include this, not because of, again, Times of Israel, we got a love-hate relationship with it, but I thought this was a really thought-provoking article. Don't agree with every last point in it, but the majority of it, I think, is really well argued. And this is, this is a right-of-center, security-oriented Israeli web daily. And I thought the author's arguments were really pretty terrific. It's an op-ed that he writes about very much in the tradition of what the holiday is about, taking stock of the year that you're departing and anticipating the new and being in communion with God with a view to repentance and mending your ways. And I just thought, okay, this really does a good job of explaining, at least in Israeli more conservative quarters, what's on their mind right now as the year turns. And it's amazing, with all the threats on the horizon to the Israeli state, this does a very good job at its focus on some unresolved questions in the Israeli politics. Not as Jews, because the Jews have a very good way of sorting out their own differences when politics is not the equation, but politically, where do we stand? Where is our identity as Israeli Jews? And I thought this was a pretty good article for something like that. So I really recommend it, especially as we head into, Paul's going to really fill us in on what this period of time is all about, and why things might get a little sporty over the following. Back to you.
All righty. So again, this is a secular view of what's going on. And there are plenty of people who will look at the calendar and say today starts Rosh Hashanah. Now, they call it their civil new year. Now, mind you, when you read the Bible, it is the 7th month. As God sees it, this is not the new year. The new year begins in the spring. But yet, civilly, they want to call it their new year. I'm looking at this more from a biblical perspective. And the new year will start, the new month will start when they see the first little sliver of the new moon, and it will be determined by at least 2 witnesses. Now, just looking at the current new moon cycle, 100% obstruction, 0% of full. Historically, that little sliver will emerge probably Tuesday evening, but they will be out there looking tomorrow. And so when that occurs, this will complete the sabbatical set, and this will be usher in a new 7-year sequence. And this is the Shemitah. This is the last year of a sabbatical set. And you can just start subtracting by sevens. This refers to the law. This is why Israel went into exile. They did not acknowledge the last year of a sabbatical set. They did not let the land rest. And that's what Leviticus 25 verses 1 through 5 talk about. But in the 7th year, I'm going to pick up right here. But in the 7th year, there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You are not to sow your field or prune your vineyard. You are not to reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untended vines. The land must have a year of complete rest. So Shemat, let drop or loose, rest or fall. So it's called the Shemitah. That's where that comes from. And then this is where it matters to us. Deuteronomy 15 verses 1 and 2, at the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a remission of debts. This is the manner of remission. Every creditor shall release what he has loaned to his neighbor. So imagine if you got a loan from your neighbor, or if you loan money to your neighbor, say you loaned them $10,000 and that was not paid off at the end of this 7 years, that debt is wiped clean. And you don't think our world wouldn't be different if we operated on a 7-year cycle of debt economically? So it's like a reset every 7 years, because the Lord's remission has been proclaimed and he will get his debt released. Is going to happen. We can start stepping back in time. 2015, 2008, 2001, 1994, 1987, we've had significant changes to economic structure, market, from the savings and loan scandal in 94. You had the big, I remember being a senior in high school in 87, I think it was Black Monday, if I'm remembering, where they had the massive drop in the stock market. The dot-com bubble, 01. We had the mortgage crisis of 08. And it just keeps happening. Well, that day appears to be either tomorrow, Monday, as we record this, or Tuesday. And that would be roughly, with that little sliver of the new moon, we're roughly, 7 hours, 7 hours from the East Coast. I mean, we're probably looking at somewhere in the afternoon, early afternoon, of when that would be taking place on either Monday or Tuesday. So, and again, that's going to happen. Something's probably going to happen. I suspect it'll be economically. We're ripe for all kinds of things to happen. I'll be interested to see how the futures open tonight with all the quiet nonsense taking place in China, where nobody's coming out, and Xi's not coming out and saying, I'm here, I'm fine. Something's going to happen Monday or Tuesday, so be ready. I don't know what it's going to be. I'm just looking at the history of this and how this has gone down. So challenging economic circumstances are likely to arise. Am I saying it's going to happen? No, I'm just looking back at history. And it happens on this day in the calendar, last day of Elul, essentially the first day of Tishri, when the new moon is observed and the new month is proclaimed. So with that, probably close this out. You have any final words, any final thoughts, Checkmate?
I can't really think of very much. I think that covers the agenda for today. I just think that you're right. This is a period of time where I don't know about you, but just watching the news, I think this is a point that we're hitting the top of the crescendo for the time being. I think there's a great deal more in store as the year on the Gregorian calendar flips. I think that there's going to continue to be more, but I think that this is a crescendo point that we're nearing the top of.
Yep, I do too. And when the new 7 years is initiated, or when the next set of 7 years is initiated, it usually signals a change geopolitically, economically, and you can only wonder what's in store. Who's going to arise over the course of the next 7 years? Who's going to decline? What's that going to look like? But change is coming. It's time for a new cycle, and the Lord will have his debts released one way or another per his word. So with that, look forward to catching you guys next week. Appreciate you stopping and taking the time to listen to the Watchmen, just a couple of dudes sitting on the wall watching the world go by. Y'all take care. Have a good one.
God bless, gang.